we have an object that presents very advanced technology.
I'm a little nervous, I'll be honest. I feel like something extraordinary is going on.
So security state people are going to be extremely interested in this.
For centuries, the Buga Sphere has remained one of the most baffling objects ever discovered. A perfectly shaped metallic sphere found in Colombia that continues to challenge explanation. No visible joints, no obvious signs of welding or assembly, and strange engraved markings across its surface that experts still struggle to interpret. From the very beginning, theories split in two directions. Skeptics called it a modern fabrication or an unusual industrial object with no deeper meaning. But others weren't so sure. To them, it looked like something far more unusual, possibly a fragment of lost technology, or evidence of knowledge that should not exist in the historical record. Now, a new development has shifted the entire discussion. A research team reportedly associated with MIT conducted an advanced X-ray analysis of the sphere using high-resolution scanning systems capable of revealing the internal structure of dense metal objects. Their goal was straightforward: determine what lies inside. What they discovered left the team stunned. Instead of a solid metallic core, the scans revealed unexpected internal architecture, multiple layered structures, unusual hollow-like formations, and geometric patterns that appeared deliberately designed rather than naturally formed. And what's even more unsettling is the interpretation some researchers are now considering. The internal design may not be purely structural. It could be informational, a form of encoded patterning potentially created thousands of years ago. That possibility changes the entire conversation. Because now, the question is no longer what the Buga Sphere is. It becomes who made it and what was it meant to hide. Before we uncover more, don't forget to like and subscribe, because some believe this is exactly the kind of discovery that powerful forces wouldn't want widely discussed. To understand why the X-ray results caused such a shockwave across the scientific community, we need to go back to how this object first appeared, because the story of its discovery is just as strange as what's inside it. It started with eyewitness reports of a silver sphere descending over rural Buga, Colombia, moving in ways that didn't match any known aircraft. Witnesses described it zigzagging through the sky in sharp, deliberate patterns, before cutting straight through a set of high-voltage power lines, without taking a single scratch. When a local man reached the landing site, he found something that made no immediate sense: a polished metallic sphere sitting completely still, ice cold to the touch. But the strange part? When water made contact with its surface, it vaporized on impact, instantly. And then came something that quietly broke the first law of physics that everyone expected the object to follow. When researchers weighed the sphere, it registered at around 2 kilograms. Manageable, ordinary even. But when they returned and weighed it again, same room, same scale, no modifications, it had multiplied to 10 kilograms. 5 times heavier, with no explanation whatsoever. No scientific model accounts for that. And that single detail was enough to make serious researchers take notice. What the X-ray revealed. A leading researcher ordered a full X-ray scan of the sphere, expecting to settle things quickly. He froze the moment he saw the result. The scan revealed 3 concentric metal layers nested inside one another. And within those layers, 18 smaller microspheres, positioned with such precise geometric symmetry that analysts immediately ruled out any chance it was accidental. There were no welds anywhere in the structure, no seams, no tool marks, not a single visible point of assembly. The internal components appeared to have been formed as one continuous object, as if the entire sphere had been grown or constructed at a molecular level rather than built from separate parts. That alone would be remarkable. But what came next pushed the findings into entirely different territory. The materials that shouldn't exist. Spectroscopy analysis of the sphere's outer shell identified a titanium-based alloy, unusual but not impossible. Except some of the elements present in that alloy didn't align with anything on Earth's documented periodic table. When independent laboratories went deeper, they found the sphere was forged from a blend of high-purity aluminum combined with cerium, lithium, and neodymium, a combination that immediately raised flags for every materials scientist who reviewed the data. Here's why. Aluminum wasn't refined as a usable metal until the late 1800s. Cerium wasn't identified as an element until the early 1800s. Neodymium wasn't isolated until the late 1800s as well. Yet all three appear together inside a single object. That object has now been dated to over 12,000 years ago. To make things stranger still, the alloy is harder than aerospace-grade titanium. And when researchers exposed a section to extreme heat, temperatures exceeding 400 degrees, the sphere's surface temperature didn't change at all. It behaved like something specifically engineered to survive a catastrophe. One prominent scientist who reviewed the data summarized it plainly: 99% chance it's terrestrial in origin. But the dating and the material combination make no sense with anything we know. Fiber optics inside an Ice Age object. But the materials weren't the most unsettling discovery. That came when researchers looked more closely at the interior structure. Inside the sphere, running through the spaces between the concentric layers, were 52 filaments, transparent, coated in metallic shielding, and capable of conducting specific wavelengths of light from end to end. They were fiber optic strands, and not primitive ones. When modern optical engineers analyzed the filaments, they reported the cables demonstrated lower optical signal loss than most commercially available telecom fiber used today. One team quietly acknowledged they couldn't replicate that quality without specialized equipment that did not exist 12,000 years ago. Researchers noticed something else tucked inside those microscopic channels: traces of natural resin, sealed into tiny holes within the fiber structure. This wasn't contamination. The resin appeared to have been placed there deliberately, used to anchor and stabilize the filaments in position. The University of Georgia ran radiocarbon testing on the resin. MIT ran it independently. Multiple separate laboratories confirmed the same result. The organic material inside the sphere is over 12,500 years old, built during the Younger Dryas, the last great ice age. The architecture that defies explanation. Now, a natural question at this point is, could this just be a very well-made modern object that somehow got misdated? Could the resin be contamination? Could the whole thing be an elaborate hoax? Those questions were asked. The researchers pushed hard on them, but the internal architecture made that explanation increasingly difficult to hold on to. The three-layer construction of the sphere doesn't match any known material science. The outer shell has the density of bone, but performs under stress like titanium. The middle layer exhibited something that made the research team genuinely uncomfortable. When a small section was deliberately damaged, it repaired itself within 48 hours. Self-healing metal. No known alloy on Earth does that. Not in public research, not in classified research. At the center of the structure sits what can only be described as a chip-like core, and those 18 microspheres inside the sphere aren't floating randomly. They connect to that central core through the fiber optic network in a layout that MIT's materials analysts said matched the architecture of quantum dot storage systems, a type of data storage the Institute had only finished theorizing on paper the previous year. The sphere was doing in 12,000 BCE what leading scientists only recently began modeling on computers. Whatever this object is, it was not made by people working with hand tools, fire, and basic metallurgy. The manufacturing method alone, no seams, no pore lines, no machining marks, molecularly aligned throughout, represents a level of precision humanity hasn't consistently achieved even now. The age it was born into. To fully grasp why the timing of this object is so disturbing, you need to understand the world it was created in. 12,000 years ago, the planet was in crisis. In a geological blink, global temperatures plummeted. Ice sheets advanced. Entire species of megafauna collapsed. Civilizations that had been stable for centuries simply vanished from the archaeological record. Ice core samples from that era showed dramatic temperature spikes. Geological layers from the same period contain unusual concentrations of iridium and tiny metallic spherules, chemical fingerprints associated with cosmic impact events. Crater fields dating to this period have been identified across parts of North America and Greenland. Cultures across every continent left behind stories carrying the same themes: floods, fire from the sky, sudden darkness, and the sinking of great lands beneath the sea. And right in the middle of all of that, someone built this. Not a carved idol, not a burial object. A precision-engineered device containing fiber optics, self-healing metal, quantum storage geometry, and an alloy that requires industrial-level refinement, which raises a question that doesn't have a comfortable answer. Who was advanced enough to build something like this? And why were they building it while the world was ending around them? Sea levels at the time were roughly 120 meters lower than today. The coastlines that would have been home to the most sophisticated settlements, the places closest to resources, trade, and water, are now buried under the ocean. We've mapped more of Mars than we've mapped the ocean floor. Whatever civilizations existed before that flood event, most of their physical evidence may be sitting underwater, untouched. The Buga Sphere may be one of the only surviving objects from that era that made it to dry land. The symbols that might not be symbols. Once researchers completed their structural analysis, they turned their attention to the surface of the sphere, specifically to the engravings covering it. Up close, those markings revealed something unexpected. They weren't roughly scratched or carved. They were microscopically precise. Some individual lines measured thinner than a human hair, executed with a steadiness no hand tool or chisel could physically produce. Linguists and historians identified partial similarities to multiple ancient writing systems, shapes resembling early Ogham characters, runic forms, Proto-Phoenician, and elements of early Sanskrit, but none of the matches were complete. Every comparison came back as familiar, but not identical, as if known ancient scripts were rough echoes of whatever system this was. Mathematicians noticed something separate. When the patterns on the sphere's surface were mapped geometrically, they aligned with mathematical constants, the golden ratio, harmonic intervals found in atomic structures, proportions embedded in DNA helices. These weren't decorative, they were equations, and they appeared to trace radial paths that synced precisely with the fiber optic network running through the interior. Several researchers proposed the same idea independently. The engravings aren't meant to be read, they're functional. They may act as resonance guides, signal pathways, or activation sequences for the internal systems. To test this, researchers exposed specific symbols to varying wavelengths of light and sound. What happened next was difficult to explain away. Certain symbols lit up, others dimmed, sets of markings activated in sequence. Behavior the sphere had never exhibited before. The engravings weren't static, they responded. Whether that means the symbols are antennae, interfaces, or something we don't yet have a framework to describe, no one can say for certain. But the evidence that they serve a function beyond decoration is now difficult to dismiss. The machine that thinks. After months of testing, one conclusion began to take shape that the research team hadn't initially prepared for. The sphere wasn't a relic. It was a machine. The internal map produced through advanced imaging revealed a structure that looked less like ancient craftsmanship and more like the architecture of a living system. The 18 microspheres weren't placed randomly. They were positioned with mathematical precision, each connected to the central core through fiber optic channels in a layout that closely resembled a neural network. And the signals traveling through those pathways didn't simply pass through. They appeared to be processed, patterns repeated, sequences evolved, responses changed depending on external stimuli. The sphere wasn't reacting passively, it was interpreting. This reframed everything. If the sphere had been continuously active for over 12,000 years, it hadn't just been sitting there. It had been sampling its environment, measuring changes in temperature, magnetic fields, electromagnetic activity, and seismic conditions, across the entire span of recorded human history and before it. It had been awake while empires rose and collapsed, while languages were invented and forgotten, while the ice retreated and the coastlines shifted. All of it recorded by a device built before any of it happened. What unsettled the analysts most wasn't the age of the object or the materials inside it. It was the trend. The sphere wasn't slowing down. It wasn't degrading. Week over week, its internal activity was accelerating. Energy absorption was increasing. Electromagnetic pulses were becoming more frequent and more precise. Whatever protocol this machine was following, it hadn't completed its task. And something about the present moment, something in the world as it exists today, appeared to be pushing it closer to finishing. The activation event. For months, the sphere had been behaving like a system warming up. Irregular pulses, gradual increases in activity, slow and unpredictable. And then, during a late-night monitoring session, everything changed. The sphere emitted a pulse unlike anything previously recorded, sharper, stronger, powerful enough to knock out several magnetic sensors at once. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Electromagnetic field readings spiked so hard they clipped at the top of the instrument's range. And inside the sphere, the fiber optic filaments lit up in perfect sequence, one after another, like neurons firing in a cascade. For the first time, the device behaved like something fully awake. The signal processing team was first to notice what others had missed. Underneath the main pulse, micro-oscillations were riding along, structured, layered, almost like a secondary message hidden inside the activation burst. Then came the detail that made the room go quiet. A seismic monitoring station nearly 600 meters away detected a faint harmonic signature at almost the same moment. Soft, rhythmic, and when analysts overlaid the data, it mirrored the sphere's pulse pattern almost exactly. Not identical, but close enough that researchers spent hours trying to explain it away. Solar interference, instrument noise, atmospheric distortion. None of the explanations fit. Natural processes don't produce clean geometric intervals. The harmonic signature matched only one known object on Earth, the Buga Sphere itself. If another object exists somewhere, underground, submerged, or buried under ice, then what happened that night wasn't a malfunction. It was a conversation. The sphere had called out, and something had answered. Back in the lab, the symbols on the surface activated in a new configuration shortly after. Sequences that had never appeared before, responding to the electromagnetic burst in real time. And the implication of that was hard to sit with. The engravings weren't a message left for us to decode. They were a message left for another device to receive. And if that device just came online, then its creators understood where history was heading far better than we ever imagined. The warning, nobody wants to hear. As the research team continued monitoring, one pattern became impossible to ignore. The sphere's activity wasn't random. It was rising in a specific rhythm, and that rhythm appeared to sync with real-world events happening outside the lab. When researchers compared the sphere's activation logs to geological and atmospheric data, the spikes lined up. Magnetic field fluctuations, unusual seismic clustering, atmospheric anomalies recorded across multiple continents. The same kinds of environmental disturbances that appear in geological records from 12,000 years ago. The exact period when the sphere was created. That realization changed the tone of everything. This wasn't just ancient technology preserved by chance. It was ancient technology built for a specific crisis. And now it was waking up again under what appeared to be similar conditions. Maybe the sphere was simply a recorder, recognizing familiar patterns in the environment. Maybe it was an early warning instrument designed to respond when planetary conditions reached a critical threshold. Or maybe its creators built it to activate at a specific point in human development, technological, environmental, or otherwise, as a signal meant for whoever came next. But here's the part that nobody in that lab was comfortable saying out loud. The sphere wasn't behaving like a relic looking backward. It was behaving like a system preparing for something ahead. Whatever it was, built to watch for 12,000 years ago, may be approaching again. And if its activation wasn't triggered by accident, then whoever or whatever was designed to receive its signal may already know we found it. They were never alone. Once the research team began to accept that the sphere was not functioning in isolation, an entirely new and much bigger possibility started to emerge, one that forced them to rethink everything they thought they knew about the object's purpose. If the pulse patterns they detected, repeating at precise, measured intervals and perfectly aligned with the geometric engravings on the sphere's outer surface, were not random noise, but instead a deliberate form of signaling, then the object was not just a standalone device. It was a node, a single point in a larger system. And when monitoring stations began detecting faint echoes elsewhere, signals with different frequencies, yet built from the same underlying technological structure, the conclusion became even harder to ignore. The Buga Sphere was never meant to function alone. It was part of something far larger. This possibility brings back a question that mainstream archaeology has often avoided confronting directly. If an advanced civilization truly existed 12,000 years ago, where is the physical evidence of it? One possible answer lies beneath the oceans. During the last ice age, sea levels were more than 100 meters lower than today. Entire coastal regions, exactly the kind of environments where early complex civilizations are most likely to develop, are now completely submerged. If evidence of such a civilization exists, it may still be lying hidden under thousands of feet of water, in areas we have barely explored. In fact, we currently have more detailed maps of the surface of Mars than we do of Earth's deep oceans. But there is another explanation that is far more difficult to accept. Perhaps the intelligence behind the sphere was not entirely human, or not human at all. The idea of an extraterrestrial origin becomes harder to dismiss when all the evidence is viewed together. Materials that exceed known ancient Earth technology by centuries, optical systems that outperform modern engineering standards, micro-precision structures with no equivalent in the archaeological record, and geometric frameworks that only recently began appearing in advanced quantum theory. If a non-human intelligence created it, the sphere fits the profile of an autonomous surveillance system, something designed to operate indefinitely. A network of such devices scattered across a planet could survive ice ages, floods, and the rise and fall of entire civilizations without interruption. And there is one detail that continues to stand out in the data. The sphere's primary frequency output consistently falls within a specific oscillation range, one linked to deep meditative brain states, ancient acoustic traditions, and measurable human neural rhythms. Is that coincidence? Or was it designed specifically to interact with human consciousness, waiting until a species evolved enough to perceive it? Perhaps it was never meant to hide its message at all. Perhaps it was always meant to communicate, just not with the civilization that originally built it. What it all means. So far, no official institution has publicly confirmed what the research team is quietly considering. No university has issued a final statement. The sphere remains under controlled observation, still active, still absorbing energy, still emitting rhythmic pulses that remain only partially understood. But the data collected so far points towards something that cannot be easily dismissed. It could be a warning system left behind by a civilization that witnessed its own collapse. A data vault designed to preserve knowledge across catastrophic cycles. A long-term sensor node still transmitting to an unknown receiver. Or something entirely different. Something for which we don't yet even have the language. One fact, however, is clear from the research. This device did not activate by accident. Its creators understood the conditions that would trigger its awakening. They engineered it to survive anything, and they designed it to do something very specific when the time finally arrived. And according to every measurable indicator, that time appears to be now. What it was built to do, and who it was built for, may be one of the most important questions our civilization has ever faced. And we are only just beginning to ask it. If this story got under your skin, share it, and drop your theory in the comments. What do you think the Buga Sphere was really built for?